And we are back once again. Vin and Dave's Destination Unknown. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I need to probably get into this wine. I just left it sitting here. I didn't want to get started too early this evening because, as we talked about, and I don't know, it's not like we planned it, but we've both been severely restricting our calories, and I'm only going to do one bottle of wine. I know. People are like, what? We're only doing one bottle of wine tonight.
But it's a good bottle. We do have a very good bottle. So this is a slow press Cabernet Sauvignon, and it's a 2016. Yeah. How's that?
Very nice.
Pretty
Yes.
good there?
Oh, that's perfect.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Good wine. Really, really
it
good
got
wine.
a 91, Wine Spectator 91 score. So, you know it's good. You know it's good. So, you know, we have our arrangement with wink.com, so people can go to vinarmani.com/wine if they want to be a wine sponsor. But last week we started in with bitbacker.io, supporting them, kind of a cryptocurrency Patreon alternative, but they're very, very cool. And so what I figured, we're going to do it again tonight. We're going to do the power chat. If people are checking out on YouTube, then they can go to the link that's in there. Otherwise, they can go to bitbacker.io/power chat Vin Armani, or just bitbacker.io/user/Vin Armani, and they can go into the power chat. And if people want to submit power chats, we will, during the show, we'll answer your questions or comments if you want to do that. So we're definitely supporting these guys. I think they're great. And, I'll be checking that throughout the show. If you want to do wine as a wine sponsor, I think we should do that. If they do like $20 or more US in value, that we'll get a bottle of wine and they'll be a wine sponsor.
Sounds good.
And they could just say whatever message they want.
Yeah,
and do it like that. Okay. I just realized I left the heater on and I'm hearing it in the background, and it will probably, oh wait, somebody already jumped in. So somebody said, I really appreciate, this is Bitcoin Cast, said, I really appreciate the insights here and would love to see Vin's recommended reading list published. I think that's something I could probably do. It's pretty big. Both Dave and I have a lot of crossover. That would be interesting. Maybe we should do a show that's Vin and Dave's reading list. Vin and Dave's must-read reads for 2019. Go ahead, Dave. I'm going to turn off the heater right now.
That there is an app for that, obviously. It's called My Library, and it's awesome. Basically, you scan the barcode on the book.
Okay.
And it automatically populates all the fields. This little database keeps track of all the books that you have. So literally, it's like, I've got shitloads of.
And then what? Can
books.
You share it or what?
I don't know. I never really wanted to, but I will try to figure that crap out. There are a ton of amazing, amazing books. My daughter right now is actually reading the Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Workweek.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is an incredible resource. I believe it's been updated. I read it first 10, 12 years ago, whenever it first came out.
That seems like about when it first came out. Yeah.
And it was awesome. And she's reading it now. I don't know if he's updated it since then, but a lot of the concepts are just true concepts. Like, if you're looking to simplify your life and create multiple streams of income and, reduce the amount of time that you're actually working. And, this kind of takes us into the topic that we're going to talk about, because most people spend their lives trading their time, trading their life for money.
Right.
And what if we could escape that paradigm? What if we could actually just, create what he calls a muse, which is some kind of product or some kind of thing where you don't have to trade hour for hour, where you're actually just, you create the thing and then you sell it, whatever. And it really, it changed a lot of people's lives.
Now, one thing that I will say about that is I'm a little bit torn. I'm torn on having having had the opportunity to spend some years where I made my living on a TV show, and then in a business that did not require very much of my time. So like let's say I had, and I mean to call any of it work is like not accurate.
Sure.
Right. So I was making money, and when I was on the clock, I was drinking and partying and enjoying myself in the exact environment and around people who were basically on vacation. Right. So like I was living a life on vacation. And and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I think it does kind of get into the topic a little bit of like reinvention and these types of things. I will tell you that it was some of the psychologically most difficult time in my life because of a lack of focus, because I didn't have to be doing anything, if that makes sense. Right? Like single guy, no one really depending on me. I didn't have to be doing anything. And so I got into, I found things for myself to do, right? I started businesses and whatnot, but it was interesting, even the types of businesses that I started, because I wasn't necessarily concerned if it was a complete loss.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to like now, I really am concerned about, okay, I'm not even going to get involved in that business if it's not going to be profitable. Right. So I think that, if you don't have something else that you're passionate about, I think that it can be, again, it's like it's a trade-off. It's a weird trade-off. You can find yourself in some weird places. I think that's why so many actors, musicians who have like high royalties that come in every month, they wind up, just coked out or committing suicide. Like you would be like, wow, didn't they have a great life? But it's like, no, when you don't have meaning in your life,
That's the key. You got to have the meaning. You got to have something that feeds your soul, and that is the missing component for a lot of people. You look at people who just are wealthy, like they come from a wealthy family.
Sure.
They really never have to worry about putting groceries on the table because they're taken care of.
Right.
And so you have these trust fund kids, whatever, and they spend their entire lives searching for that meaning. And a lot of them never find it.
No, for sure. And I think that today's topic, which is, we're going to talk about the death, and we're going to start out talking about.
Yeah. We're going to go all kinds of fun places.
The death and rebirth cycle, which is like, I think it's the major archetypal mythological cycle. Like it is the framing cycle, I think, for all. I mean, it's the major arcana of the tarot. It's the hero's journey. It's the frame within which we find meaning, right? And by the way, someone's finding meaning. We've got Sempt on Bitbacker, who just sent us over some smart cash. Thank you very much. Said ready for an interesting conversation. Well, I think we're gonna have one. So you suggested this topic today.
Yeah, and then weirdly enough, you were like, "Hey, did you see my tweet about Sears and Amazon?"
That's what I had thought that you were maybe keying in on that, but you hadn't even seen it yet.
Right. And then I'm like, "Oh, this is perfect." So I replied back to your tweet, saying that it had tie-ins with like Oedipus Rex, right?
Sure, yeah.
Which it does. There are parallels there. But I think, if you back off, to like, 10,000 feet and you look at it, it's like nature's cycle of the seasons, and, plants and animals die, they decay, they feed the future animals and plants. And the same thing has happened here, right? So Sears had grown up, it had flourished, and now it's dying, and it is actually, literally feeding the blossoming of Whole Foods. So out of the ashes of Sears comes, Amazon and Whole Foods.
And it's weird that the logo of Whole Foods is like a plant. It's like a plant logo, a leaf.
Yep. So Sears planted the seeds, died off, and now out of that is growing these Whole Food stores.
Sears is an interesting story because Sears, it's funny that this whole thing is happening with Sears, because I had actually been doing some research I had a dream over the sort of Christmas break.
Oh.
I've been working on this platform, and I had been thinking of wanting to have a name for this platform. And then I had a dream, and this sort of, it was interesting, like a name came to me, and then I was like, ooh, that's an interesting name, and looked it up, and then it was taken, and I was like, well, why are you giving me this in a dream? Then I went to I was like, thesaurus, and I looked, and there was a word that I had never seen, but I don't want to say the name here because it's not, but there was a word that I had never seen before. And I looked it up, and I was like, oh, how did I not know that this was a word? But it has to do with like the railroad tycoons of the Transcontinental Railroad, and a nickname that was associated with them that was from somewhere else as well.
Wow.
And so I ended up getting that domain name, and that's what I'm naming the platform, because it's very interesting. So I had been, so in that couple of days, I was really interested in like looking up the railroad and how that was the end of the Old West. It was the death of the Old West.
Yeah.
And it was the beginning of the Wild West. And the Wild West was only 30 years. People don't realize that. It was only 30 years. And it was the 30 years from after the beginning of rail lines going on the Transcontinental Railroad, which was connecting Chicago, to the coast. And it was just those 30 years. And so all of that sort of the Western, we get some stuff that's the Old West, but anything where you see the train moving through, that's the Wild West. And that was, and it was wild because that's what brought everybody out. Before that, you had to be hardcore.
Oh, yeah. It took months.
6 months.
Yeah.
6 months. And you might die on the way.
Probably. Somebody in your party is, because you're not going alone.
No.
You're taking a group.
Yes.
Somebody's going to die.
So it was like it would cost 6 months and $1,500 in that time. So, wow. And then it was like you could travel across the entire country in, I think it reduced it to like 2 weeks and $150 from end to end.
Wow.
And so Sears, they basically created the mail order business by shipping these catalogs, and then you could order via the catalog. And then the U.S. government started to do, they didn't have free rural delivery. So like if you lived in a rural area, you would have to go into town to the post office to pick up your mail. Mm-hmm. It was only, some of it was because of Sears that it was like, oh, we can go door to door anywhere in the U.S., which is something that Amazon now is the reason. Amazon Prime and being able to go 2 days door to door almost anywhere in the U.S., you get it in 2 days. That's shocking.
It is shocking. I mean, I'm shocked every time the UPS guy pulls up in front of my house because I live way out in the country. But
it's crazy.
It is crazy.
But to think that so Sears basically pioneered that, and then they built themselves into an empire. And I mean, it's an old company. It's like close to 150 years old. And then it dies because companies are like organisms. They are born, they're young, they're teenagers, then they are mature, then they're old, and then they die.
Yep.
And then, as you say, like on the carcass of Sears, here is this other business. And I think, what it may really mean is that Amazon is actually still young. It's still growing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like an adolescent.
Yep.
And it's an interesting story, and it's totally fitting that it would be Amazon to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What was great about Sears, you could literally take their catalog, you could order a house, you could order a car, you could order guns, you could order live chickens. I mean, there were so many things that you could order from their catalog, in addition to, laudanum and morphine and, whatever drugs you wanted, and, your cocaine, tincture. So, yeah, I mean, there's just so many things that they pioneered.
Right.
And there would be no Amazon. There would be
No.
there wouldn't be a lot of things if there was no Sears.
Yeah, and I think that now, Amazon's, it's so weird that Sears began as mail order, then they went to become a retail giant, and now Amazon is killing retail by doing what Sears initially did. But see, they're taking advantage of like an entirely new communication system. They're taking advantage of the information superhighway, right? So you had the Transcontinental Railroad for Sears, and then you've got the information superhighway for Amazon. But what I find interesting, and what I see happening, and what's interesting with this Bitbacker, and why I'm liking this experiment, is, there's this. You can go on and do an anonymous power chat on this thing, right?
Oh.
So you don't have to sign up. You can just go on, type in a message. It'll give you a QR code. You scan it. You give some amount of crypto, and it'll put it up.
Wow.
And that's a whole, this is the baby steps of that. When more of our apps are integrated with our cryptocurrency wallets, when our browsers are more integrated. I mean, there's already plugins, that cryptocurrency wallet plugins, but we're in the baby stages. But you imagine, being able to pay on a per page basis, instantly, no sign up, don't need to put in your credit card, don't need to do anything like that, anonymously. You just fill up the wallet wherever it is, and you can scrap the wallet, you can trade, you can do whatever you want. There's the things that we're going to be able to do with this technology is so interesting, and I almost feel like this might be the thing to kill Amazon.
Unless Amazon adopts it.
Yeah, that's weird, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's possible, right? I mean, they could just start accepting, crypto for everything, which would be great. But, I don't know. They're still young. They're still flexible. They're still agile. And that's something that when you get older, whether you're, a living organism or a corporate organism, you lose your agility, you lose your flexibility, and you kind of get stuck. And that's what happened to IBM. IBM was great back in the day. But at some point, other companies came along that were faster, more agile, more able to adapt and react than IBM was. And then IBM was passed by, and they've never recovered. I mean, they're still a huge company, but they're nowhere near what they were.
Well, it takes a long time for a giant company to die.
Oh, yeah.
It dies piece by piece by piece by piece.
Yep.
And that's... honestly, that dying phase of a company that's the place when the market kind of suffers, because you don't know, is it dead? Is it not? And the instinct for people is to say, well, how could it die? It's so big. It's right. Well, it's so big.
Too big to fail.
Yeah, it's too big to fail. It's gigantic. And so you're like, oh well, it can't. But that's the message of the archetype of death and rebirth, is that no, it's going to happen.
Yeah. And that's the thing I think that the ancients understood better than we do, is that life doesn't go on forever. You have to plan for when there is no more life, right? So if you're not actively, thinking about and planning for transition, whether that is metaphorical or whether that is literal, then you're failing in life, because the end is part of the story, as we saw in the Avengers 4 trailer with Tony Stark. He's like, the end is just another part of the story. It's true, right? The end is a part of the story that needs to be at least thought about and planned for. And it is interesting to me how many religions and non-religious organizations, Masonry, for example, they have the Chamber of Reflection. So the Chamber of Reflection is actually a separate room off of the main lodge room, and it's normally, dark, and it has a skull and bones, a literal skull and bones, the various, mostly alchemical,
Sure.
symbols around, and, items and, things like that. But the purpose of spending time there is to contemplate on your mortality. And it is our mortality that defines us, because, if we were immortal, it would be like the trust fund kid with infinite funds who never had any priorities. Because we are mortal, because we have a very limited lifespan, we have to seize the day. If we don't, if we fail to carpe diem, then we are not going to achieve what it is that we need to achieve in life.
Well, the ancients had a much tighter relationship with death because they saw it on a daily basis.
Sure.
I mean, our cultures, the ability to not be around death at all is you really don't have to be in our society. You really don't have to be. That it's the idea that if you see death on a regular basis, that must be horrible and traumatic. But it's like, no, that's been a part of being a human being. I mean, you were at least going to see the death of the things that you were going to eat.
Yeah.
At least.
Because you went and killed it.
Right.
Yeah.
And you probably would see the death of siblings, and because, infant mortality has been, it's only now that you would just expect, you're pregnant, congratulations, and not have like a 50-50 chance that like either the baby's going to die within a year or the mother's going to die in childbirth.
Yeah.
Like that relationship with the cycle.
Yeah.
Is because what happens is it makes you, I do think that's the desire for eternal youth comes out of a neurosis and a phobia of death, but that's because we sanitize everything because which means that you can't have the recognition of the cycle, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you've taken the meaning out of the cycle. Because what you've done is you've said, death is something we don't want to look at. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to celebrate it unless it's in a movie or a TV show or something. And then it's just presented either in an overly sanitized way, right? Because if you're watching a television show and somebody's going along and they're like, bang, 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 shooting people, and then people are like, oh, and they fall over and they're dead. That is not how it looks in real life.
No.
At all.
No.
Okay. If you are, like if you see a horror movie and they're strangling somebody, right? And they just kind of gently pass out. No, that is not how it works. No. So death is ugly. Death is harsh. Death is, often extremely traumatic, obviously for the person experiencing it, but also for the people around them. And, and it's like, if you take that away, then you are preventing people from going through a normal emotional maturation that has been part of our experience since the beginning. But now what we've done over the past, 50 years, maybe? Not even that long.
Yeah, not even.
Is we have sanitized it to the extent that we're not getting the meaning, we're not getting the emotional impact that we need to understand the importance of death, the significance of it, where it fits into life, and that the entire thing is just one big cycle. And the whole cycle of life is running through my head from Disney.
Circle of life.
The circle of life and the cycle of poo from South Park. But I mean, it's like there is meaning there, and we have lost a lot of that.
Yeah, it makes it really difficult to explore the archetypal and the mythological if you don't really want to get into that cycle. I mean, psychedelics have definitely helped me with that.
And that actually is a huge part of the whole transformation thing. So if you want to look at death and rebirth and resurrection in a metaphorical sense, the entire experience of using a psychedelic is that experience. I mean, you go in as one person, and by the time you come out, you have changed. You are a different person.
Well, the shamanic practice, the metaphor that shamans use all over the place is the idea that either they die or they're disintegrated down to their bones. So the equivalent, right? Disintegrated sort of down to a skeleton, or disassociated into molecules, all of these things. Mm-hmm. I've certainly had that experience where I was like, oh, I'm dead. But and a lot of people, particularly with ayahuasca, but I've had it with high doses of weed, right? Like I'm super susceptible to marijuana.
Was it nearly a lethal dose of weed?
I don't even know if that's a thing.
It is not a thing.
But I've definitely had some doses where I was like, okay, this is I'm not sure. And what else? Dextromethorphan has done that. Ketamine, I've had some serious experiences like that. And there's something to going to that place and then sort of being an observer in it, and letting the anxiety go pass, because that's one of the things that, when you're forced to deal with it in that way, when it's brought into this very real emotional state, then you can actually work with it and push through it. Because I think the natural human instinct, when you start meditating on death, if you're not particularly used to doing it, your conscious mind is like, stop. Don't think about your own mortality. Whatever you do, don't do it. It's painful to think about your own mortality. It's why people don't like interacting with people who are, terminally ill.
Yeah.
Is because it's going to make you confront your own mortality.
Yep.
So there's this, I guess you'd call them a sect, a tantric sect that I was initiated into maybe in my 20s. Ananda Marga, one of my business mentors, an Indian guy from Hong Kong, sort of introduced me to it, and it has a very interesting founder, P.R. Sakar. I talk about him in the Ascendant Project. Their thing is meditating in graveyards. It's one of the things that they do.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I've never done it. It's not something that I would. You've got to be pretty strong in terms of your meditative skills to stay focused. But I think there is something to contemplating mortality, not for any other reason than to just kind of to allow that to seep into your consciousness, I guess.
Yeah, because I think everybody goes through the phase in their younger years where it never even enters their mind.
Right, of course not.
That
you're invincible.
Could be mortal, right?
Yeah, you're invincible.
So they're invincible. They can do anything. Mm-hmm. They can, whatever. And life is going to go on forever. Mm-hmm. So like Star Trek, love Star Trek. There were a couple of episodes that actually spoke to this. One was Tapestries, and that's the one where Q came back and allowed Picard to change.
Oh, I remember that.
A particular event in his life, and he had, in his very young, probably early 20s, he was an ensign in Starfleet, and he had been stabbed by a Nausicaan because he just got into an argument. They were, gambling, whatever, and he stood up to this, big badass Nausicaan, and the guy stabbed him through the heart. So they rush him into the hospital. They replace his heart with an artificial heart and save his life.
I think I remember this, yeah.
But what it gave him was that insight into, wow, life could just be gone in an instant. And so that brought everything into focus and allowed him to take chances and be more highly motivated, more focused, more intense in achieving his goals than anybody around him, which is why he was one of the youngest, captains in Starfleet. So when you have somebody who at an early age internalizes the idea that time's ticking, man, I am on the clock and I got to go. That is the kind of person that achieves a lot during their life. If you have somebody who at a young age never has that experience or never learns any kind of lesson that would provide that, they kind of drift, they kind of just kind of go here, there. They never really come into focus. And so when Q actually removed that event from his life and he woke up and he was, his current age and all that. He was a lieutenant.
Right.
He was
I do remember
really,
this, yeah.
Crappy job.
Yeah.
He was some science guy. And,
Yeah.
And he's like, who's the captain? So it's like, some of the things that people regret from their life are the things that define them in positive ways and negative ways. But if you have this perception of, I am on the clock and I have got to get to work and I have got to make things happen, then your life is going to be vastly different than somebody who has seemingly infinite time, infinite money, infinite resources, because they don't care and they end up adrift.
I've been thinking that it's interesting that you bring that up, because as of late, there's this weird space in my life, because it's, here we are in my office where I come in and I work on software.
I'm just saying, you could put up some posters or something.
And I've got all these baby vodka posters back at the house. I just haven't brought them over. Huge, giant, with the marketing posters, which are beautiful. The artwork is just gorgeous. And so maybe I'll have those in for next week. But I come in here and I'm doing software, and it's this weird thing, because I essentially stopped. So I've been sort of playing a what if scenario, right, in my head, because basically in when was that? So I guess that was probably 2011 was when I stopped. I did the first season of Gigolos. We didn't get paid very much for that. And then I continued working in software until the company that I sort of started back with at that time, they lost their funding after, it was a startup. They lost their funding after, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 months. And so then I was like, yeah, why am I even going to do that? And then season 2 is about to start up. And so then I stopped doing software. And I was doing some things with, like, working on some little Bitcoin things, some Internet of Things type of stuff. Like, I still kept my chops up during that time on little projects, but all the businesses that I was starting were not software businesses.
Yeah.
But that was what I had been doing since a kid. Was like technology businesses. And it's just, I had been thinking lately about, like, okay, well, here I am back to doing that, right? What if I had just kept doing the software thing? So there's this basically like 8-year gap, let's say, professional software developer. Again, I was keeping my chops up. I was still working on software. I was still working on projects. But in terms of, like, professionally coming in, doing it every day. And instead I was, started a vodka line, and I was doing podcasts, and I was writing books, and I opened an art gallery, and I was producing movies and comedy specials and series and, like, all these different things, right? And I was thinking about it, and I was like, would I be in where would I be in terms of software wise? And I actually think that, well, even take it like this. What if, like, Gigolos hadn't have come along, right? And I just would have continued on from where I sort of was in my career at that time, like senior lead developer, right? And I had continued on, like, what does that look like 8 or 9 years later? And I think I would be less satisfied. I
guarantee it.
I just would not have grown as a person.
I would bet any amount of money on that outcome.
Yeah. I would probably be like a CTO of some company, somewhere, probably in, like, Santa Monica. Maybe I'd be, some middle executive at, like, Yahoo or something like that.
Yeah, dude, you are just built for middle management. I'm telling you, you really just totally cut out for that job.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that I was looking back at a email, the first email that I had with Garen James, who ended up becoming my agent, both theatrical and then, in the escort business. And it was interesting. It was kind of like we were talking about the journal thing, right? Looking back. And when I was, like, telling him about myself, and I said, yeah, I'm in software. but I'm looking to get out of it. This is very interesting. And so it's like to go back to where I was at that time and be like, really, were you though? Like, were you, is that where you were at? Because I mean, I love doing software. I love writing software. But I think that it was just because, I mean, I was on a great sort of career path. It's not like I was doing things that I hated. I mean, I was working at awesome startups. But it was other people's shit, you know? And I had projects on the side, and I had my business on the side that was, you know, generating income with the software projects and stuff. But it's just interesting, like those. It's almost like I had to die to that person, right? Completely, and then start really from scratch because there was nothing. I mean, I could pull in sort of who I just was as a man, but it's not like you can pull a lot of your software skills aren't really hugely going to translate into the gigolo game. Let's just put it like that. And I had never been on a TV before. Like that's something brand new that you got to learn.
Yeah.
And then, and yet it's a very, very similar thing in terms of, you know, making the decision to be like, okay, well, no, I'm going to move to New Hampshire and I'm going to start this cryptocurrency business and I'm going to be more involved with that, which I'm also passionate about. The gigolo stuff doesn't really translate either.
Well,
except who you are as a person translates, right?
Sure, who you are as a person, but then look at the experience that you've had and the knowledge that you have to share with other people and how that has shaped your life, right? So you have television skills, you have production skills, you have product marketing skills, you have entrepreneurial skills.
Bow staff skills, hacker skills, a little Napoleon Dynamite. Girls love guys with skills.
That's right. Bow staff. So you've got you have a variety of experiences to draw from. Whatever comes up. And that, in my mind, allows somebody to pursue a more adventurous life.
No, I agree. I agree. The weird thing is that they're very subtle. It's a very, so I wouldn't say that these are necessarily like specific skills, right? So it's not that what I gained over that time was like some specific skill that I could like put on a resume and be like, oh, I've got this skill, this skill, this skill. It's not necessarily that, but it's like a subtle understanding about certain aspects of human nature that are universal.
And your own nature.
And and especially my own. I think the biggest thing that I got from out of that was, you know, when you are literally naked on TV in front of millions.
HBO, check it out.
Showtime.
Showtime, damn it. The joke's better if you get it right. Showtime. Check out Showtime.
You know, you have to get right with yourself in a hurry.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're fucked mentally, psychologically. And I think because look, that's like people have nightmares about, oh, I was naked giving a talk in front of the class, you know what I mean?
You show up at school with no pants, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is like, because it's an idea of being exposed. Right. You're exposed. Being vulnerable. You're vulnerable. You're exposed to the world. This is like a lizard brain sort of thing. And experiencing it the first time was incredibly jarring. But, you know, I was definitely sort of had mentally prepared myself, but nothing can really prepare you, right?
No.
And then also, you know, haters like that. And the first couple of years, that really was something you can't prepare for.
No.
The idea that there are going to be swarms and hordes of people who are strangers, who don't know you, who are going to hate on you just for no apparent reason. Like you're a good person, you haven't done anything wrong to anybody, but they're going to find something to hate on you for. And what's interesting is that I think of all the skills, or of all of the sort of ways that I changed as a person, I think the most valuable one, especially to be able to carry into sort of especially the realm of crypto and Bitcoin, where if you're in that community, the haters are just everywhere. I mean, well, it's trolling. Trolling is just a part of the ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to deal with trolls, you're going to deal with sock puppets, you're going to deal with all of this. And
not to mention the vast misinformed throngs of people.
Dude, it's huge, huge, right? So I think that's the most valuable, is to just be like, I'm unfazed by it. If people just carry on, I'm like, well, I don't have to hear this. I'll mute them. I don't block people. I don't do that. But like, I'll just mute them, because like, I'll allow you to carry on in a thread. That's fine. I just don't care to hear you. Yeah. You can say whatever you want. It's not that it bothers me. I just don't. I'm just bored with you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I have no plans to respond, so I'm not going to bother reading.
So I'm not going to. Why read it? Right? Yeah. You're annoying. You're not bringing anything to the table. But to also be able to, to be able to hear some of it and be like, is that a legitimate criticism? But to be really honest about, like, is this legitimate what this person is saying? Like, to even take stock of yourself a little bit, but to not change yourself to please anybody.
Well, like in particular, the one guy who posted that Nick Hawk had whipped your ass in that rap battle. You really had to take an assessment.
I don't think there was no guys that did that. There were a couple of women that may have done that, but there were definitely no guys, and no one who has any sort of rhythm or appreciation of music whatsoever said so. No, I do think that's super valuable, because I do see people in the space who I'm like, wow, you're not dealing with even this little bit of fame very well. It's even a little bit of notoriety, you're not dealing with it well.
Yeah.
I see it in the libertarian space. I see it in the crypto space.
The celebritarian space.
In the celebritarian space, you have to appreciate that there's going to be haters. They're hating you for no apparent reason, and I think that's when we talk about death and rebirth, ego death. Jung,
that was Jung's concept. Mm-hmm. Ego death, and it's critical. And that is one of the things that people experience during the psychedelic.
Oh yes, big time.
Experiences. So you will have a psychedelic experience, and you will go through this what they call ego death. And it isn't death. What it is your ego or your psyche separating, metaphorically from your body, so that you're not feeling it. And one of the really interesting mechanisms that's built into all of us that is automatic. We have no control over this, but there's like a reality checker. So there are like these mechanisms within your mind that are constantly checking just to make sure things are real. Like things are there, things are real. You're not in the middle of a dream.
Kind of like a little pinch, like you pinch yourself.
Yeah. But it's automatic. It's subconscious.
Right.
And when those things shut off, right, and people go through this ego death, then reality and non-reality blur together into one thing. And so that was what Jung was describing by ego death, and that is the you could actually apply that concept to all of this, all of it. So
it's the key.
Yeah,
I think you have to have it in order to be able to take hate coming from individuals. When you're just doing your thing, you're just doing the best that you can. You really have to be able to. I think it's like maybe like training wheels on a bike in some ways. That's how the psychedelic experience has been to me, because the first time that you have this sort of legit ego death, there's this you get this notion that like, oh oh, that's not even me. That thing that's worried about this, that's got this sort of anxiety, that cares what this individual thinks, that's concerned about this, oh, that's not even me. That's maybe it's an aspect of this broader thing that's me, but it's not. You get the sense that, like, that's not really me. That's sort of almost like it's almost like a vehicle, or like a suit, an exoskeleton around me that helps me move around and navigate the world, but it's surely not me.
Wow.
And that, to be able to go back to that, right, as the training wheels, to be like, oh, that upset me. Oh, that hurt my... And then it's like, oh, no, actually, what am I talking about? Like, that's so silly. Like, that's not even me. Like, you get it, you feel it, and then you're immediately like, oh, that was ridiculous of me to feel that way. And what I think is that, to tie it back, you know, we talk about, like, outrage culture. There's outrage culture.
God, yeah.
And outrage culture is just like the hardcore manifestation of the ego in control.
Yeah.
Of no appreciation of higher self, of no empathy, no nothing. It's just like ego in full blast control. It's going to be offended. It's going to be take things way too seriously.
Yeah.
And then try to actually hurt somebody over it.
Right. And that's the other part of it too, is like the ego can be offended, the ego can be damaged, but then it seeks retribution. It's like, okay, well, you hurt my feelings, so I'm going to come back and I'm going to hurt you twice as bad. And that's all ego driven, and ego feeds on fear, you know. So the ego death, removing that component from your experience, which most people never do, right? Because there has to be something that happens that is traumatic, something that is meaningful, that causes this to happen. And it doesn't happen for everybody. There are rituals that are meant to make this happen.
I think that's I think that's the purpose of real rituals. Is to try to spark that ego death, right? To put you, to move you into, I mean, well, maybe you could talk about this from like a Masonic standpoint, but it's like...
the third degree is all about it.
Yeah, the idea of moving you into this sort of well-trod space that's bigger than you could ever be, right?
Yeah. It's incredible, the experience of actually going through the third degree, which in current modern day is much shorter than it used to be, but it is an acting out of a quasi-historical story, right, of the building of Solomon's temple and the people that were involved in that. And there was there are bad people, and these bad people confront you and they accuse you and they stop you from moving. And if you are in a good lodge, you will be jarred but not injured.
Right.
And there's a fine line there.
Right.
Because you want to like shock the person. That's the whole thing, is like you really want to like get their attention and make them feel like there's danger here. This is serious. Like there's no joking around. Like before a lodge, everybody's like slapping each other on the back, shaking hands and laughing and talking and drinking coffee. Once the door closes and the ceremony starts, if you were having it properly done in a good lodge, everybody knows exactly where they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to be doing, and it is designed specifically to give you this transformative experience from beginning to end. And it is long. I mean, it takes, like 3 hours, and there's an intermission in the middle. And part of it is educational, and part of it is actually experiencing the metaphor, the story. They put you in the footsteps of this quasi-historical character, and you are experiencing things that you may have never experienced. You may have never had somebody get up in your face and like confront you. You may have never had somebody falsely accuse you of something. You may have never been whacked on the head, rolled up into a blanket and carried off into the woods. You may have never had these things happen, but they symbolically happen in the Masonic Lodge to give people that experience of, oh my God, I think I'm going to die. Like, this is weird, and it's dark, and there are people yelling at me, and, whack you, and then you get whacked in the head, and then you fall down, literally, and then you get like wrapped up, and you're like you're cocooned up in this, carpet, and, it's like, this is nothing you can't read on the internet, people. I'm not giving away the secrets. I'm not going to die tomorrow. So I mean, you go through this traumatic experience that is physically and emotionally draining, and then you are brought back into the light. Mm-hmm. All of this happens in one night, and it is specifically designed to create this experience, this ego death, this transformation, this hero's journey, all of it so now you have ended your normal human life, and you have now been brought back into the light as a Mason. Mm-hmm. And it's not just Masons. There are a lot of religions, there are a lot of organizations that have very similar concepts and similar rituals. The Native Americans, right? The
Sweat Lodge.
The deal where they stick the hooks through the chest.
Yeah. That whole, I forget what that's called.
Yeah, but they literally cause themselves excruciating pain and stay out in the sun all day. So by the end of the day, they are, in shock. I mean, literally in shock.
It's not called the Sundance, is it? No.
Follow the sun, Sundance. It is like that. It very well could be that.
The Indians have Kavati, I believe, is very similar, where they stick goes through and then they hang them.
Yeah. But the whole point is to give them that near-death experience, so that they have this transformation, so that you are, putting away childish things. You are now a man. You have now, elevated yourself in not only your own mind, but also the minds of everyone around you. You have our stamp of approval, basically. But it involves transforming from what you were to what you are now. And, internally, externally, it is a complete transformation.
Well, this brings up a good point about rites of passage. And so much of the rite of passage is killing off the child.
Right.
And it's something that our culture is. It's one of the last sections of my book, Self-Ownership, because I mean, when I went and lived in a dojo and in my early 20s, a lot of that was about, and the message was all about. I mean, and I recall my sensei telling us all the things that we no longer were, right? And so much of it was about the old you, the person that you were when you came here, was a child, and couldn't do any of the things that you can do now, and that it was all about like, okay, you've reached the point where the old you could not do anything beyond this, and now you're going to go beyond this because you're not that person anymore, and you're going to prove to yourself that you're not that person because you're about to kill that person's dead. They would die beyond this, and you're going to go beyond where that is.
Yep. And
I think that that's the message of so many rites of passage, and that one of the issues that I think, when they talk about millennials this and Generation Z this and blah, 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 they talk about this extended childhood. There was this article saying, childhood extends into age 26 now or some shit like this, right? But because if you don't have a rite of passage, you can't say when it ends, because you have to kill the child off. And in many traditions, that even includes having a new name.
Yeah.
Right? You get a new name, and that literally, that old person, you don't even get called that name anymore. It's that person is dead.
Yep.
And now you get this new name. And I think there's a great power and a great attraction to that. I think it's something that is driving. It's not talked about, but I think that it's one of the things that is driving these young men to go off, these young Muslim men to go off and fight jihad, like on the side of ISIS and whatnot. You look at, I think they just arrested an American guy in Syria, I guess, who was fighting with ISIS, or maybe it was somewhere else. As an American guy, American kid, and of course he had his nom de guerre, right? Abu whatever, al-Amriki, you know, like, so you go off and you even get a new name.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you are able to leave that behind. And so, like, these young men who are Muslim in these Western societies, they have just as little chance to find meaning in their life as any of their peers who are non-Muslim, except for the fact that they could go and do this thing where, okay, I become a man, and there's some danger.
Yeah.
Legitimate danger.
Sometimes they blow themselves up.
Sometimes they do that. But more often than not, they go, they spend a little time, they do this thing. It's just men shit that they're doing with other men, you know, and then they go back. Right. There's probably some of that too. And then they
You
go.
ever seen a grown man naked?
Well, and then they go back to their community, and they're you know, respected individuals that they had gone off and they had done their duty as a Muslim man and fought on behalf of, you know, Muslim people elsewhere. And there's something to that. There's something powerful.
Yeah.
And the fact that since, you know, 2001, but even before, the refusal, and I think especially now too, right, that it's like, oh, there's a clash of civilizations, but it's like, well, are you not going to learn from the savage, right? Are you not going to learn from the savage? Like, is there not something there? Do you not care what would be so valuable that a, you know, college educated, young 20-something British middle-class kid would give all of that up and go to some training camp, terrorist quote-unquote training camp in Afghanistan? Are you not even going to ask, like, wait, why did you go? Are you not even going to, you're just going to throw him in Guantanamo and torture him? You're not even going to ask, like, hey, what did you find so valuable? Like, why did you leave all of this behind? Because I think it's a lot less about, I hate America, I hate Western society, I hate all of that. I think it's a lot less about that. And I think it's a lot more about finding meaning in one's own life and leaving your childhood behind and becoming a man.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with the sanitation of the death experience.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people aren't experiencing the cycle of life. They're not experiencing what it really means to be alive and know that you're not going to be here forever. You have a limited time on this earth, and then you will die. And then what comes next, you know, it's like, if you can't give people a real experience, and the more we go, you know, into the virtual world with computer games and, you know, the VR. The VR stuff, it's like everything's going to be simulated as if it isn't already.
Right. Go back to episode 2 and 3 for
right.
that, folks.
So, you know, it's like people don't have a real experience. There's not a visceral experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's the visceral experience that people are lacking. And that's what leads to fight clubs. That's what leads to people seeking out these kind of, you know, military things. And you know, they want that raw,
Proud Boys, the whole Proud Boys thing.
Yeah.
We're going to go and fight with Antifa, but also Antifa on the other side. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's these people, they want to, like, what is making these kids want to go out in the street and fight? Well, it's like, well, what else do they have? What are you giving them?
Yep. There's no real meaning. It's like, oh, great, you achieved this score at a video game.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares, really?
Well, because there's no real risk.
No.
There's no, you don't feel it.
The only real risk is to the ego.
Right.
And if your ego is number one, then that's a real risk, right? Because that's, you know, there's fear of failure, there's fear of ridicule, there's fear of, you know, oh my God, people are going to see me naked. But when you are really in there are certain fighters that you watch in MMA or whatever, and you know for a fact that this person is an MMA professional fighter. Mm-hmm. There are other people that you see in MMA, and you look at them and go, I would not want to be alone in a room with that person because they look like they are just ready to tear somebody up.
Yeah, they're a killer.
Like they are born to this.
Right. Right. There's a definite difference between those two types. Yeah, for sure.
Because one has a governor and the other doesn't.
Right.
One is in control. The other may be in control, but damn, is that going to hurt a lot more.
Well, what you're seeing rage.
Yeah.
You're seeing rage. It's interesting. One of my favorite bodybuilders is Kai Green. I don't think he's won Olympia, but I think he's gotten as high as second. I think he's gotten as high as second overall. Amazing physique, like crazy. And the way that he trains is just, it's insane. He would, when he would come in for Olympia, my brother would see him train all the time in Venice at Venice Golds, but then when he would come in for Olympia, he would train at the gym that I trained at in Las Vegas. And there are some interviews with the dude, and like he's just very open about it, where he's like, I have a lot of rage, like this physique, what I do, because no matter how much you control your hormones and how much steroids you're taking, you can't have. I mean, the dude's only like 5'3", you know what I mean, and he probably weighs 275 and has like 0% body fat.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah, just look up Kai Green. It's ridiculous the way this dude's physique
I'm going to see if I've seen this guy before.
And yeah, he's just like, this is rage. This is rage from my whole life. Like that's what I've found is I found a way to take this rage and just put, and it comes out on stage too. He jostles around with the other. It's like something you'd never ever see. But he's kind of a villain, but he's a total fan favorite and a total like sweet, nice guy too. That's the other crazy part about it. What, you looked up a picture of him?
Is that him?
That's him, yeah.
Right. Is our audience seeing this?
Yeah, they are.
Holy crap.
Ridiculous, dude. Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah, pretty sure he's Klingon.
He looks like it. He was, what was he in? Oh, that I saw. I think it was a Netflix show. Something about people, they had some sort of weird powers. But he was in one of these.
Oh, was it Superhumans with Stan Lee?
No,
that the one?
No. I think it was the Sixth Sense show, or Sense 6 or Sense 8 or something like that. Anyway, he was in that. He was actually great in that. But there's something to those people where you can sense their rage, and I think that's what it is. That you could just sense those people you look at and you're like, oh, this is a killer.
Yeah.
Right? It's like where you're like, oh, this is not going to be a technical fight, because at a certain point, just the monster breaks loose.
Yeah, even like looking like at Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like Brock is he's both a pro wrestler and a MMA fighter, and he's had some incredible MMA fights.
He's a real fighter.
Dude, that guy is a monster.
Yeah, he's no joke.
That's the kind of the appeal when he does his wrestling matches.
Right.
Because you're never quite sure, is he going to pull it back? Is he actually going to let the other guy? Because that was the thing with Andre the Giant back in the day. He had to, he was letting you win.
Right.
Like there was literally no way. Nobody was as strong. Nobody was as big. No. Nobody could do what he could do, especially in his prime. Like when he was young and agile and doing his thing, he was unstoppable.
Right.
And he had that weird, freaky monkey strength that would just like surprise you, because he could literally snap bones between his fingers. The guy was, he would pick up a beer can and it would look like me holding a Dixie cup.
Right.
So, when you talk to guys like Hogan and, those guys that actually had wrestled him back in the day, and they're like, you don't understand, like, you had to actually, like, butter him up a little bit And if he didn't like you, you were going to feel it for days after the match.
Wow.
And if he did like you, if he was one of your guys, if you guys were pals or whatever, he would let you win the match. But you knew that he was letting you win the match.
Right. It's very important, that concept. And I mean, it's weird that we have, especially with UFC and with MMA becoming a thing. It seems,
even though it's so watered down, but yeah. Go ahead.
It seems with the culture that we have, it seems really counterintuitive to me. I think maybe they let it stick around now because they have the women's division.
Yeah.
Right.
The Ronda Rouseys, the Shayna Baszlers.
It seems like the culture that it seems like MMA could be the next target of kind of the whole social justice thing, because it seems like if you were looking for an example of the patriarchy, but maybe it's men kicking the shit out of each other, and so that's not a problem. I don't know. It's very weird. It feels like there's. Yeah, but maybe because maybe it becomes a substitute for a rite of passage. I wonder about those things. Like you're talking about, sort of the virtual, and is it not the same thing in like cheering for a particular sports team, right?
Oh, yeah.
That you get the rush of victory when your team wins without any risk, without any effort on your part, without having to do anything except sort of drink beer and cheer at the screen.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like cheering for the gladiators. Mm-hmm. So the gladiators going out and actually doing the battle, you're just sitting in the stands cheering for them. But as Marcus Aurelius reminded us, that it doesn't make sense. Like, we shouldn't be cheering for either side.
Well, the part that I've always found strange is and this is, of course, every morning in the gym when I go in, especially now living in New England. It's like, it wasn't so serious in Vegas, although you had a little bit of it because everybody's a transplant. But of course, being in New England, it's like everybody's going to be talking about the Celtics, Bruins, Red Sox, right? So it's like, but it's always like, we this, we that.
Yeah.
We won. Oh, if only we could get this player. You know what we really need? We need this. And it's like, really, we?
Yeah, because when you have a local sports team and you look at the particular sports team that have the most fanatic followers, like Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You look at the Midwest, right?
Yep.
So like Iowa college football.
Yep.
So I spent a lot of years in Iowa. And I will tell you that those people take their football, their college football, so seriously. Oh my God!
Iowa's Hawkeyes, right?
Yeah. So it's ridiculous. I was like, okay, I'm going to try to watch this and kind of get into it. It never stuck with me. But it's like it's an identity thing. It's like, my guys are better than your guys. It's and ties back to the ego. Like, if my sports team is better than their sports team, then I'm better.
But the weird thing is like the my team thing.
Yeah.
The my team thing is the weirdest, because it's like there is zero required. Like there is no commitment. There is zero commitment required to say my team.
Right.
Like you can literally go out, buy a jersey, or not. And then just say, we this, we that, we that, we this, we that. And it's like, no, there's a real hero's journey being played out here. There's a real drama taking place. You have individuals who have devoted their entire life to, literally their entire life. Because when you talk about a professional athlete, especially in the major sports, right? If you're sitting there and you're looking at a 35-year-old NFL quarterback, he has been playing football since he was 6 years old.
Oh, yeah. Easy. Yeah.
6 years old.
Yep.
It's like this he's been playing football as long as he's done literally anything, including like going to kindergarten.
Yeah, it is the most important thing in his life. And he showed early natural talent that was then developed hardcore throughout his entire life.
Now you think about that and you realize there is not some other profession where that's the case. I don't care how good of a surgeon you are.
No.
You were not doing surgery at age 6.
No.
But he probably was the quarterback of his little Pee-wee Pop Warner team at age 6.
Yeah.
I mean, the ball was like, it's funny. I love watching those little guys go. If you've never seen Junior All-American or Pop Warner, the 6-year-olds, I think that's the first year that they start. It is, go watch one of those games. You've never smiled so much in your entire life. They can't hurt each other. They're just bouncing off each other. The ball's going everywhere and everywhere. But you think of all the professions. So here you've got, like there was this video that went out of this dude cursing out this kicker. Oh my fucking God, he can't $27 million and he fucking missed the kicker. We can't just, and I was like, whoa, like here's a man who's actually like, it's really on the line for him.
Yeah.
Here. He's not getting paid millions of dollars because there are really millions of dollars on the line, because dumbasses like you are paying for tickets, because this guy was walking out of the stadium, right? This like, he's putting butts in seats.
Mm-hmm.
You came here to see the drama.
Yeah.
You don't actually want him to make every kick, because then there's no drama. Then the meaning is gone from this thing.
So that fan does want him to make every kick. The people who have a higher perspective knows that he's not going to make every kick, and they're going to capitalize on that. And the people with an even higher perspective go, what the fuck are we talking about? Like, who cares? Like, this is dumb.
Well, the reason that I bring it up is because, especially with football, probably football more than any American sport, and it's probably why football has become the premier American sport, is because it is ritual. Right. I mean, there's no more ritualistic sport than football.
And it mirrors so many of the things, like there's a team element, right? And everybody has their job. And that ties back.
The high level of specialization is unlike any other sport.
Yep. And it ties back into the military, right? So you've got like this military unit fighting another military unit, and everything is on the line, and they go in and do battle.
It's on a line.
A literal line, yeah.
Everything is on a line, and they're going to go, and the tide is going to constantly turn. And sometimes by design, sometimes you're in control, and sometimes the other side's in control.
Yep.
And who you need to be, because I mean, when it first started out, and like most of us when we're young playing football, you play both sides of the ball. You play offense, you play defense, right? Yeah. And then you eventually figure out which side you go towards. Yeah. So like I played both sides of the ball growing up, and then it was like ended up on defense, right? Because it was much more about like reading, reactionary, and is much more about reading individuals and playing off sort of where they're going, right? Like feeling, to be able to, I played outside linebacker, and I could, if I got somebody who I could really read, like some of the linemen, like a guard and a tackle where I could really read, I'd be like, I would know just by where their eyes were going, sort of how they were shifting their bodies before the play, to be like, oh, this is, you know what? This is a deep pass play. Oh, this is going to be a sweep out to this side. Oh, it's coming right at me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like I could, so I was much better at that. As an offensive guy, you're controlling the situation, but it is this very prescribed, ritualistic, down to, you got the Super Bowl, and then it's like, oh, who's going to do the halftime show? And it's so interesting that you've got this ritualistic game that then has bred, the Super Bowl is a great example of this, but it's like, it's bred all of these other rituals around it.
Sure. Yeah.
The halftime show, right? That the conspiracy theorists have they're always because it's always got some weird Illuminati shit. But of course it. See, the thing that they're missing is, of course it does.
You
because
continue
the whole
to underestimate
thing,
our power.
Well, the whole thing is a ritual.
Yeah, it is.
And you're not going to bring in top artists and say, hey, here's the national ritual that we do. What are you, put on a show. Of course they're going to do a ritualized show. Of course they're going to have ritual elements in it. They know these archetypes. They write them into their songs. They're artists.
Yeah. They know. Absolutely. Think about the paradigm of the team and the hierarchy of the team, right? So let's say that you are on offense and you've got your quarterback. There's only one quarterback.
Yep.
Not everybody's a quarterback.
That's right.
So the quarterback gets the ball. A lot of people's job at that point is to protect the quarterback.
That's right.
By any means necessary, so that he can launch the ball downfield and hopefully have it retrieved by somebody on his same team and then make forward progress. So people are sacrificing themselves like pawns in chess in order to allow the king or the more mobile piece to do whatever move it is that they need to do. They don't feel bad about this. They feel good about this because people are dogs. And when you're a dog, you are in a hierarchy. And if you are comfortable in your place in the hierarchy, that's all that matters, because you have meaning, you have purpose. My purpose is to protect the quarterback. I'm not the quarterback.
Right.
I'm just here to keep this guy from tackling him.
Yeah, well, what's so interesting about that, especially, it is that linemen are very interesting individuals, right? Well, first off, offensive linemen are the biggest guys on the field. They're absolutely huge.
Quite beefy.
If you stand next to an NFL line, especially a tackle, they're absolutely huge, and they move fast, and they're super strong. And yeah, these guys' job is just to protect this one guy. But what's so interesting about this is even people who are hardcore fans of teams might not be able to name the whole offensive line, right? And you rarely have. It's been probably since the 80s or maybe 90s when you've had sort of standout offensive linemen where people have been like, oh, just the greatest offensive lineman. But what people
Super Bowl shuffle, man.
Yeah, what people don't realize is the level of respect that those guys have from the other, especially a winning team, because you can't win if you don't have a good offensive line. You just simply cannot score. The respect that they have from the skill players, the guys who are getting all the notoriety, on a good team, they're the most respected players, right? And especially from the quarterback himself, right? So it's like these guys are highly respected, but it's interesting that it's like within the football world. Like these are the guys who are not exposed necessarily to the outside world so much. They're not flashy,
Right.
They get paid. They get paid very well.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that if anybody is the most sort of in on the ritual, I would say that it would be offensive linemen in that way, because they're really truly like playing this role that if they don't play this role, none of the drama happens.
Right.
If those guys don't show up, none of the drama takes place.
Yeah. And they are never going to score a touchdown.
Never.
They are never going to.
They may never even touch the ball in their entire career.
Never touched the ball, never did anything that was going to show up on a stat sheet. But yet, they protected their quarterback. So they have lived their entire lives just to lay their life down for someone else on the field of battle, and that brings them meaning, and then that brings the fans meaning, and then everybody is just like, oh, I see this historical drama playing out in front of me. And sure, it's pro football or pro wrestling or any sport, but it has that same resonance that we've had all the way back to the beginning when it was gladiators or it was knights, and it was just, it's the same thing. When soldiers are in the military and they lay down on the line so somebody can crawl across their back so they don't set off the mine or whatever, it's just like that kind of stuff. It speaks to men especially on a very deep level, that personal sacrifice. And I think that also speaks to the death and resurrection story, because, when you are willing to make the sacrifice, and I think that's what a lot of our modern generation has lost, is that sense of where do you fit in the grand scheme of things? Because everything isn't about you. And are you willing to make a sacrifice? Are you willing to lay your life down for somebody else? Are you willing to maybe not die for somebody, but are you willing to do a long-term suffrage, some kind of sacrifice that takes 20, 30 years, right? Because you know that it is your duty and you are honor bound to complete it, and that's your job now. And it's like the bridge officer's test in Star Trek, to make another Star Trek reference.
What's it called? The Kobayashi Maru?
No,
that's the captain's test. What's the bridge officer's?
So the bridge officer test, this was Thine Own Self was the name of the episode from Next Generation. And Deanna Troi was feeling kind of left out because she was the only one on the bridge that hadn't actually passed the bridge officer test.
Okay.
And she's like, I want to do this. And so Riker's like, no, you really shouldn't do this. It's not for you. And she's like, no, I really want to do this. And so she goes through and she passes all the written tests, whatever. And then they have the final test, which is held in the holodeck. And in this scenario, the ship is having some major catastrophe. And the ship is going to explode in, like 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes to save the ship. Here's everything that's going on. And she goes through this over and over and over and fails every time. Every time she fails. And eventually, she's getting frustrated. She's like, I don't get it. There's no solution to this, blah, blah, blah. And Riker says to her, just remember, it's not about you. It's about the ship.
Right.
And something clicked in her head, and they restarted the scenario. And, Geordi LaForge, the engineer, comes up, and, he's describing the problem. Oh, there's this, whatever leak in the Jeffries tube. And she's like, can you fix it? And he's like, yeah, but, if I actually go down in there, it's lethal radiation, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, can you fix it? And he's like, yeah. And she said, then I order you to fix it. That was fucking deep, man.
Right.
When that happened, you could see, like, she changed in that was a transformation. That was a death and rebirth, because the old Deanna Troi that was all about, everybody's happy and everything's good. That person has now died. And now you are somebody that can command someone to their death because it's your fucking job to save the ship.
It's interesting because what's coming to my mind is sort of the paradox of individualism versus collectivism. Because what I think people who are collectivists, who look at individualists, when I look at individualists, what I see individuals, for the most part, the sort of, I think the misinterpretation is an interpretation of individuals who are selfish.
Yeah.
Selfishness, right? And I think that, like, Ayn Rand didn't really help with that. and I think that it was more that she was misunderstood in terms of what she was saying regarding selfishness.
Right.
To say that, laying down your life for another person is actually selfish. So for instance, a parent sacrificing their life for their child
Yeah.
is a completely selfish act. And I think any parent can relate to that idea, because it's like, well, it's you or your child. You're like, well, I'm not going to live with having made a decision to live on and my child dies. I don't, like, at least for me, I'm like, that's a terrible, I couldn't live, I'd kill myself anyway after a while. So I'm going to make okay, I see the way easier way of this. The totally selfish decision in this point is to sacrifice my life for my child. And I think that's like inbred, obviously, right? Like that's just in our DNA.
You know what's funny is you're absolutely correct. I had never thought of it that way. Because that's kind of like a double reversal, right? It's like, you're thinking, oh, I'm sacrificing myself for someone else. It's very giving and loving and,
No, it's selfish as shit.
Right. But then when you look at it like, what would happen next?
Exactly.
Then you're like, oh, yeah, I wouldn't be good with that.
Exactly. And so what I see with people who are individualists, hardcore, is they want, for the most part, the opportunity to be the best individual that they could possibly be. But also what I see when individuals like that, like here in New Hampshire, when you get a bunch of individualists together, what I see is a lot of selflessness.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of hardcore individualists who are anything less than the most generous people. Not to necessarily to strangers, but to within their tribe, and to certainly with, people who are within their purview.
Yeah.
Right? Not trying to actual other human beings.
Yeah.
They are not to some nebulous idea of a thing.
Right.
But to actual other human beings, I see incredibly generous individuals. Whereas from the other side, from the collectivist side, I see people who, to actual individuals, they could give a shit.
Yeah.
But are like, oh, I'm doing this for the greater good of such and such, for this organization of something. And it's like, but what about this individual that's like right here, struggling, suffering? Well, but they'll be taken care of when we've achieved this collectivist utopia up here. That's why I'm doing it up here, because that's going to end up taking care of them. And it's like, but we could be taking care of them right now.
Right.
Like,
and
we could be actually taking care of them.
That to me is the biggest difference, is that people always want somebody else to do the job. Mm-hmm. They're like, homeless, a huge problem, whatever. And, we need a government program. Well, really? Do we need a government program? Or do you physically need to walk up to a homeless person
and do something,
help them?
Well, you can't. You can't feed the homeless. That's illegal in a lot of places.
It is true. And then you get arrested, and then they assign public service to feed the homeless.
Right.
Stanhope, people. Doug Stanhope.
Doug Stanhope, yes.
Dude's fucking hilarious.
But I do see that with sort of what is the most selfish thing that you could, and I guess I don't see, because I'm so not of the collectivist mindset, I can't even put myself into that space, because I actually see individuals out there, and I know I can help some people and I can't help other people. But one thing that I do know is you got to put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. And I think that part of that is not just like get yourself right in terms of your material well-being, but get yourself right in terms of your spiritual well-being. Like, you got to kill off the worst parts of yourself.
Yeah. You got to leave childish things behind. You got to, kill the ego, kill the fear, kill the parts of you that have essentially defined the negative aspects of your personality. And a lot of people don't have the insight to understand what that is.
But it's also not going to be fun, that process.
No, it's going to hurt.
And I think that we've, the self-help. Well, Tony Robbins seems to be pretty good about this, but it's also not going to be quick. And it's not going to be the thing that you decided. I think that's one thing that's very interesting. It's going to be something that calls out to you, and it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it's going to hurt. And you're not going to want to do it, but you're going to know that it's the best possible thing that you could do, and then you just got to fucking do it, because that's the only way to kill off the ego.
Yep.
You know?
And sometimes it takes somebody that you care a great deal about to put the mirror up in front of your face.
Sure.
And go, you're ugly.
Yeah.
And then you got to go, no, I'm not. You know, and then you struggle with it for a while.
The haters.
Yeah. And then you get sad, you know, and then you realize, like, yeah, okay, you got a point. Let me try to fix this.
Yeah, it is, but it's all about whether or not you have the fortitude, and I don't even know that it's about fixing, right? It's just a question of not fixing but evolving, because
Yes.
that's the
evolving,
the death and rebirth.
Yeah.
Right? That's what the killing off the old, because the new is a new species of you that is better adapted to the world, that is better able to walk through the world in a more positive way and be more productive, and but it really is about recognizing, like, okay, what are all the things that the current me would not be able to handle? What are all of those things? Okay, now I got to do them plus tiny bit, plus a little tiny bit. Maybe that's waking up an hour before, you normally wake up, or maybe it's like an hour of doing something during the day, whether it's writing, whether it's building something, whether it's cleaning. I think that's what Jordan Peterson's whole clean your room thing, I think that's why it resonated with people. No, seriously, because you'll walk into a situation and it's like, well, this space is discombobulated, you know, but people will just keep the ritual will be, well, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. And no change.
And then you're a hoarder, it's like
you got to make the state break, right? Like you got to make the break of state to where it's like, okay, let me do something that current me wouldn't do.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a little thing, and sometimes it's a big thing.
Could be.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, sure, maybe it's like, okay, my New Year's resolution is to wake up 30 minutes earlier every day. I want to go to the gym every day. I want to do this every day, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes life hands you something like the bridge officer test to Deanna Troi, where it's not a little change. I've literally done the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. I ordered a friend of mine to his death. That fundamentally changed. The person inside changes. So then you start looking at, maybe waking up 30 minutes earlier every day isn't that big of a deal.
Right.
It's just something I need to frickin' do.
Right.
Because I'm a responsible adult and I have responsibilities and duties and things I need to get taken care of. It puts perspective on things. And I think perspective is sorely lacking in today's society.
Clearly. I mean, if we have outrage culture, that means there's no perspective.
There is no perspective.
Yeah.
It's just outrage about everything.
And everything is not, well, I think it's because there are so few big deals.
Yeah. There are so few real dangers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, everything is perspective, but when you have a world that has been made super, super safe, then you have to introduce the danger on your own. You really have to decide that you're going to push yourself into some realms where you're going to fail. Which you have to fail.
Goes back to your point about the person joining, the Muslim military to go do a thing. It's like,
find something and do it. I think that I think you're right though. I think virtual reality is the unknown sort of looming threat And I do really view it as a threat. And the realer it gets, the more of a threat it becomes. Because you start to be able to control the rituals. And people are there. The level of sophistication at the sort of production and creation level is so much higher than at the consumption level in terms of the level of sophistication.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's not like the country priest in some medieval chapel and who was pretty much at just a tiny bit more sophisticated than his parishioners. Mm-hmm. You're talking about master, because the you can have one company creating a video game, mm-hmm. virtual reality world that is then consumed by millions of people, and they're able to attract the top propagandist, mind control talent, and so people don't think I'm like whacked out. I'm not saying this in some sort of conspiratorial Illuminati. It's not even that. I was on a reality TV show.
Yeah,
like this is a profession.
Yeah,
there are people who professionally craft the reality that you see that you think is real because you see it on some show.
They're called marketers.
Well, producers, story producers, screenwriters, like all of these people, the best of the best.
Yeah.
You don't know whether it's real or not because they're playing with mythological archetypes. They're doing all of these things
on purpose.
Oh, no, completely on purpose.
Yeah.
They can tell you every shot by shot what they're doing.
Yep.
The editors know it. They're communicating with the screenwriter. Oh, should it have been like this? No, it's got to be, this frame has got to be switched with this frame because if you do that, that changes the whole meaning of what just happened here.
Yeah.
In subtle ways that people don't even understand. Like, the idea that when you... And people will notice this now when they look, but they've never noticed it before. If you're looking at dialogue on screen, basically the way that we have our screen split here, if you're looking at dialogue on screen between two characters, you'll see one character, they're going to be facing this way. So let's say they're facing to the left. And then you see the other character, when it cuts to them, they'll be facing to the right.
Yeah.
You didn't even notice that. But that's just... it's ingrained in terms of, okay, these are the rules of how we lay this out so it feels real. Because if they were facing away from each other, your brain would process it as like, oh, that's not right.
Yeah, and not only that, but like, remember Lord of the Rings, where Gollum was talking to himself. So
Mm-hmm.
he was actually with the hobbits, and he was going through this internal struggle, like, no.
Yeah, when Gollum and Smeagol are like fighting with each other
back
inside
and forth. Yeah, so he's arguing with his reflection.
That's right.
In the water.
Yes.
And so the way that whole thing was filmed, you had one that looked all innocent and nice,
Mm-hmm.
and it was higher, and then you had the other one which was lower. It was coming from below,
right,
and it was all mean and nasty. So all of that well thought out.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
But it's not even like, the thing is that it wasn't even like the individual who was storyboarding that out, like they just thought of some new novel thing.
No.
It would almost be like if they had not storyboarded it out that way, the next person who picked it up, either as an editor or an animator, would be like, well, wait, why didn't you do it like this?
Yeah.
Because this is what we learned in film school.
Or the next storyboarder after the first one was fired, right. Then they would go, oh yeah, this guy was an idiot. Here's how you got to do this.
So, I mean, because that in film school, you're going to get that education.
Yep.
This is just going to be known to everybody that you're around. This is a language. It's a metaphoric, storytelling, ritualistic language, just like hieroglyphics. That's understood by a priest class. And the thing is that it's, we talk about the gap between the rich and the poor. But that's nothing compared to the gap between the priest class, the real priest class, not the religious priest class, the media priest class, and the public.
And think about how we've reinforced that through the years, through the abysmal public education system
Oh,
because
it's really bad.
we are not teaching the classics. We are not teaching, like when I put Oedipus Rex on Twitter and literally everybody looks at it like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
I'm going, y'all need to read a book.
Yep.
And, I wasn't taught this in school. I had to learn this on my own.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think we may have read Oedipus Rex in high school, maybe.
Oh, there was a lot of daddy killing and mommy fucking going on, so we didn't read that.
I think we may have read it.
Must have been a liberal school.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know what. No, I think. Well, I was also it may have just been something. It may have been something in the house because my parents were English teachers, so.
Oh, they would have definitely had it.
Yeah.
So that would have been on
something
tap
we discussed.
in the household.
Yeah, something we discussed.
It's an important work, and yes, English majors absolutely would have focused on that because it is hugely important. Because of the archetypes, because of the death and resurrection, because of the struggle, because of the renewal cycle that's in there. But, the education system that we have does not breed new priests. Like we talked in a former show.
Exactly. Yeah.
There have to be new priests.
Yeah.
Where are they coming from? And in a lot of cases, they are not coming through the education system.
Well, that's a good point. Where they're coming from now, it seems, is they're coming from out of like YouTubers, people. The unfortunate part about it is what you get because there are so many people making content. Some people naturally are gifted for storytelling
because they pay attention.
Perhaps, but I think it's just that it like resonates with them. But it's kind of like a Jedi Sith thing to where it's almost like, a Jedi is trained to sort of utilize their powers. That's kind of the light side. That's what people would call the right-hand path. That there's an orthodoxy, right? And that was always the way with the priest class. But I think what we have now is because there are so many people that have the ability to have the tools and they get a chance to experiment for themselves, which is very much the alchemical path, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that there's positive and negative with where you have order, certainly. So you've got the Jedi Order. It's literally called the Jedi Order, right? So it's like here you have
God, might as well make a government,
right? So here you've got this order, and it's literally about order, which I've always found interesting. That it's like, oh yeah, the light side in Star Wars is about order, and the dark side is about chaos, and they make the light side look like that's good.
Yeah,
it's actually that's one of the things that's wrong about Star Wars, by the way.
Yeah,
is that they have the dark side doing the Empire and the First Order, which is actually wrong because that's the left-hand path, and the left-hand path doesn't do that shit. That's what the right-hand path does. So, the idea with the sort of Sith should be on the chaos. It should be chaos.
It should be.
And I think that in the canon, actually, of where the original Sith and where like Darth Maul's people come from, and like there's this whole
Darth Bane, where it was created,
yeah,
the Rule of Two,
yes, and so that's more.
Please go read those books.
Yeah, so that's more, and the Night Sisters, that's more chaos, right? And chaos is inside of you. You developed it on your own.
Yeah.
You found it on your own, and then those people who rise to a certain level, they find each other, and that's kind of the alchemist idea. That's the idea of an alchemist, right?
And the path is hard.
The path is hard, and it's solo.
Yeah. Well, unless you find a teacher,
right,
who will likely, abuse you, try to kill you,
exactly.
whatever,
yes.
and then will expect you to kill them,
right,
when you're ready, right?
Because it's an individualist path. The left-hand path is an individualist path.
Yeah.
Right. So this is what we're approaching now. Is that there is. I feel like YouTube And the type of, look, the content creation that we're doing here is like, it's very much left-hand path. It's all about like, okay, put it out there. If people like it, keep doing what it is that you're doing. There's a lot of people who are doing derivative shit. Obviously, like you see some things where it's like, okay, here's a formula. So they're following that. And that was true of a lot of alchemists too, to where it was like, oh, I need to go and find. So you either have the people who are on the sort of cutting edge, Faustus threefold coercion of hell, Black Raven type of alchemy.
I like all those words.
Right? or you have the individuals who are like, I need to go out and like find this book that's by this individual. But the thing about this book by this individual that's like the Necronomicon that's wrapped in human skin, that's by the mad Arab, all is Ram, but it's like, but what about all is Ram?
Yeah.
He wasn't out looking for a book. He was just on it himself. He wrote the book.
He found the knowledge. How did he find the knowledge?
And this is the question.
Yeah.
Right. That's the and that's the left-hand path. That as soon as you get into an orthodoxy, you're on the right-hand path. And I think that what we've got now is we've got a lot of people on the left-hand path, and they can move themselves up, where it's like, hey, look, I've got these millions of views, and then somebody in a production company is like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll give this guy a try. And you can sort of build your portfolio and move through that way. The problem with that is that you get some very unbounded individuals. Each of them who have, because they've moved through it in their own way, each of them who have some skill set that is not some trick that is not immediately noticeable to the individuals that they're around. And so they're able to like weave that in to everything that they do. And it's just, I think it's just way too sophisticated. The level of control that's able to be executed. And I think we're seeing it, dude. The people, the level of addictedness that people are to social media, to online games, to all of this, it's just...
Yeah. So it feeds the ego because it is instantaneous, right? It's like you put something out on social media and then you literally sit in, I'm not saying you do this, but I'm saying people do this. They literally sit and wait for their to go up and the shares to go up.
Everybody does this at some point.
I do not do this.
Okay, fair enough.
No, because honestly, it's not my, I do it for fun,
Sure.
I'm going to get on there. I'm going to look at what you post because you're my buddy. I love you. Sure. And, it's like you post cool stuff,
Appreciate it.
I listened to that song that you posted. That was okay, It was all right. I'm not going to call it the perfect song like you called it, but, it was all right,
Is it a pop song?
Perfect pop
song.
Yeah, and I started listening to it, and I'm like, yeah, well, okay, it's formulaic. It's got all the things. It's got
all the things.
Yeah, it's got all the things.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. You say...
It literally could have been designed by AI.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like, that's what I was trying to say, that it's like, if this is Taylor Swift singing on this,
sure,
this is a number one single.
Yeah. Because music sucks. Modern music sucks.
It's not that it sucks. And that's what I was trying to say. It's not that I was necessarily trying to say that it was that it was something great. But it does go to this what I was saying earlier about finding the book. It's almost as if these guys had found the Necronomicon of pop music.
Two guys. There are two guys that create all of the modern hits.
Yeah, it's Dr. Luke, and there's another guy as well.
Yes,
and so
I'm glad you were able to remember one of their names because I was blanking on it.
So, but that was sort of what I was saying with that particular post. Was it was like, wow, guys, because this was two other guys that it's like, yo, you guys can do what they do. That's fucking impressive to me. That's impressive, and that. So that's at the point where it's like, wow, kudos to you guys, because you should be right now, there should be record labels hunting you down. Well, and again, also a bit of a challenge. It's like, can you do this again?
But think about it.
Can you only do it one time, or can you do it infinitely?
Okay, so here's my thought on that. They replicated, right? So, okay, if our viewers are not aware, our listeners, there are two guys, literally two guys, that, white males. So obviously, this is some kind of patriarchy thing. But there are these two white males that are responsible for something ridiculous, like 90% of the top pop songs of the last decade. It's ridiculous how
they've got
many
they've got the
songs.
formula. Yeah,
they figured it out.
Yeah,
and like the millennial whoop and like all the little tropes that are part of modern pop music. These guys are the inventors of those things, and they've written all the songs. They work with the artists, and they produce these mega hits.
Yep.
Somebody, and Vin posted the file, they came along and they replicated it. They replicated the technique, right?
So to a T.
But here's the problem. Because if the two guys, as I suspect they are actually just crazy smart geniuses who know exactly what it is that they're doing, and they have been subtly adjusting the formula every few years, so that way when you hear a song from 2017, it sounds different than the one you heard in 2015.
That's right.
And now when we hear something in 2019, it's going to make what we heard in 2017, that's kind of out of date. That's out of style. 2019 is where it's at. Even though when you really analyze it, the differences are so subtle.
They're subtle.
Yeah. So yes, they may have totally hit upon that one formula.
They actually, it's interesting because, I've been a DJ since I was a kid, and like I could tell it was interesting what they did, because they took a basically straight ahead like Dr. Luke pop formula, but then the breakdown in there is they ripped a British artist called Troy Boy, who has been so forward. He's kind of like a Kanye type, to where he's way far ahead, but he's usually like a year ahead, to where you hear something and you're like, that doesn't really make sense to me. But by the end of the year, it's little pieces have grown. Pop music is it's always intrigued me in that way, to where it's like, it's memes, right? But it's these patterns. Yeah. And people have to get used to certain patterns. They're not ready for this track yet, but this will seem old in 3 years. They'll be like, oh, that's an old sound. It's not even right, because people will have worked on, they'll have this track and then they'll be like, damn, I want to try to replicate that. But they threw in this Troy Boy thing in the breakdown, to where I was like, oh, they nailed it, because they took it just straight ahead bubblegum pop, and then they took it just a little forward.
Yep.
And it was like, okay, people are actually ready for that right now. Like, they can actually hear that right now. And it won't sound like, what is that weird shit?
Yeah.
But the little breakdown there 2 years ago, people would have been like, this doesn't even make any sense.
Right, but 6 months from now,
right, it'll be old.
Not even old, but it'll be familiar.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's the key. Is like the key to a huge mega success is familiarity. And that's why these two guys, they have created familiar sounding tunes, even though they're different songs or different whatever. They're familiar enough that people resonate with it. So that's great.
It's interesting, and so like I'm not particularly into pop stuff, and the stuff that I listen, like if I posted something today that most people would probably listen, and I was like, I've just had it on repeat, but like most people would hear it and be like, what the fuck? Like, that doesn't even make any sense to me.
What was it?
It's I don't know. Go on my Twitter. I just said, "Oh Lord," and then it's got like a little heart.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to play it yet. I got to play that.
So it's but so I'm usually like, what's interesting is that almost everything that I'm into, 3 years later, that's the pop sound. but it's very avant-garde. Like I love things that are, and that's just, I think that's where I've just been pushed ahead a little bit because I was in the rave scene and all of that. So it's like my musical tastes are just pushed forward a little bit. That's all it is.
Yeah.
That they're just pushed forward in terms of what I view as pop, and then it comes along. But I've always found that so interesting to see how it is just a constant movement. And I think that it goes to, and as we're coming to the end, it's music is interesting in that way, and especially pop music in terms of death and rebirth, because it's still the same chord progression. You know, there's like the 3 magic chords is still there. It's still there in all popular music it doesn't matter the genre, it's all there.
Yeah.
The same basic beats. Like you could go back to Rocket 88, which was the first rock and roll song, and then you could fast forward it into anything that you're hearing on pop radio, and it's like it's essentially the recording's better, it's electronic drums, the mastering's better, the engineering's better, but it's the same. It's like this. It's a Terrence McKenna thing. It's like there's a song at the end of time.
Yeah.
And this is all trying to get there. And it's like slowly chiseling away, right? Like slowly chiseling away to get to the song. And what people hate is they hate when you aren't chiseling.
Yeah.
They hate when you're like back, because they're like, oh, that just sounds old. That's not who they like. Is they like people who are like fucking chisel. Like I just saw this Queen documentary. It was like, you think about Bohemian Rhapsody at the time, and it's like, yeah, that's not just chiseling. That's like a fucking drill.
Yeah.
Through the rock and taking everybody there. And it's like, okay, well, you can't go back from this. Like everybody's got to go here.
Yep.
With this ballad right here.
Yeah.
And so that's why I've found music amazing in that way, is that it's a constant death and rebirth, that it's constantly, oh, that's played out, it's dead.
Yeah. And think about the things that, you were so excited about, like MC Hammer, and his potato pants, and I remember that was out there, was provocative. That was provocative. Brother, he was too legit to quit. He was, man. I mean, he was the man. I met him a few years after his fame had ended at a NAMM music show. And dude had decayed a bit.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
hard
life. You know? Speaking of decaying, oh my God, this just popped into my head. So you realize that Bill Clinton and Sammy Hagar are right about the same age. They're in their early 70s. Both of them are in their early 70s.
Sammy Hagar is in his 70s?
Yep. He's like a year younger than Bill
I would
Clinton.
see him all around Vegas doing his thing, man.
How'd he look?
Pretty good.
Yeah. He
pretty
looks
damn
great,
good, yeah.
Right? He looks like a dude that's had a really happy life.
And he has. He owns a bunch of businesses in Vegas. He's doing his thing.
He makes his tequila.
Yeah.
He hangs out on the beach.
Yeah.
And then you look at Bill Clinton with his pale skin and sunken eyes, and oh my God, that guy's had to
live with Hillary.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So we're coming to the end of this. I want to say thank you to everybody who popped in. Yeah, we had a few people in there in the power chat on Bitbacker, so I think we'll keep on doing that. You guys, of course, can go and anytime go to bitbacker.io/user/Vin Armani if you want to do over $20 in a sponsorship or like a little power chat thing. Then we'll buy wine with that and put it on the show. I don't know what we're doing for next week's topic, but we'll figure it out.
Next week we actually need to take a break.
Okay,
I've got family coming in from out of town.
So we're taking a break.
I'm gonna hang with the fam, but then we'll be back the week after that.
We're taking a break, and we'll find something cool to talk about. So we will see you guys next week. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you next week on Vin and Dave's Destination Unknown.